Let me take you back to a time when anime was still cool to me, the summer of 2013. Lucky Star had just thoroughly blown my mind, and I was ready to spend the rest of my 3 months consuming an endless sequence of awesome shows. Now, for whatever reason, before I actually became a fan, I was under the impression that every anime series consisted of several hundred episodes, so once I learned that there was such thing as an anime with 2-digit episode count, my mind was flooded with possibilities. I felt like I had nothing to lose, so if a show even had an appealing character art, I wouldn't think twice before watching it. I eventually learned the hard way that this probably wasn't the smartest way to find new anime after I saw a poster of Tropical Kiss and subsequently sat through a whole episode. It would serve you well not to Google that show. In short, the concept of bad anime was still unfamiliar to me, and dropping a show was, for at least a few weeks, an alien notion. I mean, why stop watching something that's only 12 episodes of your time? Things have certainly changed. Anyway, I realized where I went wrong with the previous times I tried to get into anime. I was always looking up most popular charts and top 10 lists, which would leave me with a show that I'd enjoyed just fine, but in no way convinced me that anime was something that really appealed to me as an individual. If I wanted to become a real fan, I needed to develop an actual sense of taste, so instead of seeking out critically acclaimed shows, I simply searched for shows like Lucky Star, which led me to the romantic comedy series Acchi Kocchi, or Place to Place. The show follows Sumiki, a shy petite high school girl hopelessly in love with her best friend Io, who's too thick-headed to acknowledge her crush, and we spend the series watching the duo and their friends have fun and share cute moments. If it sounds a little light on content, that's because it is, but who cares? When I first watched this show, I thought it was the cutest, sweetest, most adorable delight to roll out of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory since the everlasting Gobstopper. Something about its warm, romantic atmosphere was so charming to me. Revisiting the series 2.5 years later with my current anime sensibilities, and things have definitely changed. If the Lucky Star video was an example of my love for a series strengthening over time, then this is going to be a video about love diminishing before my eyes. First things first, over the years I've slowly realized that the romantic comedy is one of my least favorite genres, especially in anime. Now keep in mind there are plenty of rom-coms that I love, and a lot of my favorite shows have romantic comedy elements, but there's just something innate about the genre that keeps me at arm's length with it. To understand this, we have to explore what it actually means to be a rom-com. It isn't just a series with romantic and or comedic traits. This can be found in a whole mess of shows. Rather, these are shows specifically framed around literal romantic comedy. Things such as light-hearted comic misunderstandings, silly love triangles, failed confessions, the whole shebang. Shows like this lose me when I realize that the entire narrative and sometimes even whole characters are framed solely around a romance. When a character seems to be almost defined by their feelings for another character, not only does it claw away at my believability, but it also just comes off as shallow and unrealistic. Romance doesn't play this kind of role in our actual lives, so why should it in our fiction? In my eyes, romance is a spice, best used to enhance and bring out the flavor of an already solid main course. If you eat a plate of parsley, however, you're gonna have a bad time. Some shows take this to the next level by becoming so dependent on these cutesy rom-com scenarios that they slow character growth to a cruel and suspend relationship development in a strange quasi-limbo. I mean, if Ishijo from Nisekoi, for example, just straight up picked one of the girls, there's not going to be a show left, so of course that can never happen, unless the show wants to undergo a massive tone shift that could end up alienating its fan base.
Na, Onodera.
Fucking bullshit!
So the show has basically written itself into a creative corner that cripples any potential for growth or change. And this is the position we find ourselves in with a lot of these shows. Rather than utilizing romance to explore interesting character dynamics, it's liberally manipulated as a means to concoct these cute moments. And the more these cliches are reused, the more artificial and contrived they feel to the audience. Acchi Kocchi falls squarely into all of these categories and remains content to do almost nothing new with its incredibly familiar rom-com template. Sumiki is largely defined by her crush on Io, and Io is largely defined by how good he is at misinterpreting or straight up ignoring her affections, even to the point that it strains his believability as a character. Sumiki also embodies one of the most primitive, by-the-books interpretations of the tsundere archetype that I've seen to date. She really is exactly what it says on the tin, sharp and standoffish one moment and sweet and vulnerable the next, all in the name of those precious cute moments. I place her pretty low on the tsundere totem pole, far below the A-listers, and nowhere close to the real OG tsunderes, reserved only for the true patricians of the modern arts. Anyway, here's an example of the caliber of character interaction you can expect from this show. Sumiki stares intently at a cute plushie in a crane game. Io says, "Do you like it?" To which Sumiki bashfully replies, "Not really." Io wins the plushie and hands it to Sumiki, and she's all like, "It's not like I really wanted it or anything," and then their friends freak out and Io stands there like a clueless idiot. And yes, it's all very cute, but it isn't something I couldn't have gotten from hundreds of other anime. And that's what the bulk of this show is, a series of manufactured romantic encounters with little weight or consequence. Now when this series isn't strictly in romantic comedy mode, it's a rank and file slice of life, but because the characters are just so devoid of any character, there's next to nothing to separate you from the crowd, and no amount of sugary fluff will make the cast any less shallow. It's a hard thing to comment on since in a sense every character from every show is in one way or another built from a pre-existing template. The more unique traits and details you implement them with, the more they stand out, eventually graduating from concept to fully fledged individual. The cast of Acchi Kocchi, on the other hand, is more than content to stay within the realms of the comfortable and recognizable. They can all pretty much be summed up by their equally uninspired character art. This dude really does just look like every best friend character in the history of anime. This girl looks like someone literally took Komi-chan from Hanamaru Kindergarten and just stretched her out. In fact, while I'm talking about the art, let me just say this show's animation overall is pretty freaking unremarkable. I used to think it looked great, but looking back there's really next to no detail on its characters or locations. AIC isn't known for their incredible animation quality or anything, but this series just comes off as flat and low budget. It was produced in 2012, but I feel like it could have just as easily been made in 2005. I'm just noticing, is this the third show from 2012 I'm talking about in a row? Huh, weird. Anyway, something about the diminutive character designs has rubbed me the wrong way. The proportions are weird and the colours can be very unappealing. Also, the setting just has no personality whatsoever, very sloppy. Now you're probably wondering why I'm wasting my time picking on this innocent, unassuming romantic comedy that nobody's ever heard of. It's pretty apparent that it's just not my kind of show, but there's something you gotta understand about me. My opinions very rarely waver over time, and when I love something one year, I trust that I'll still love it 5 years later. 10 years ago, my favorite game was Sonic and my favorite show was South Park, and nothing's changed. I don't know if this is necessarily a good or bad thing or what it says about me as a person, but that's how it is. I love the feeling of revisiting something I loved as a kid and finding that my appreciation for it has deepened over time. So the idea that I could just suddenly go from loving a show to feeling nothing for it within less than 3 years is just unprecedented, and I think a lot of that is due to circumstance. Keep in mind that Acchi Kocchi was the very first romance anime I ever saw, so this is my first time experiencing playing with the scenarios and concepts that most people would write off as cliche, like the fireworks on the beach and the Valentine's chocolates and the summer festivals. Imagine if all the things you consider trite and generic about anime were suddenly fresh and interesting. Imagine how massively that would affect the shows you like and dislike. My biggest problem with the show is how uninspired and generic it is, which is a problem that wouldn't exist if the viewer hadn't seen any shows like it, so in a way it makes perfect sense that I enjoyed it so much. I'm happy to report that if there is one thing about this show that is just as incredible as I remember, it's the OST. The soundtrack to Acchi Kocchi is so goddamn beautiful. It honestly blows my mind that it was wasted on a show this bland. A flawless assortment of gorgeous string and piano pieces, this soundtrack is by far the best thing this show has going for it, and highlights its poignant sentimental scenes more perfectly than any of its actual characters ever could. This show honestly wouldn't be even half as effective as it was without its music. Honestly, go look it up right now and enjoy. It never stops being awesome to listen to and sits proudly with Samurai Champloo and Hidamari Sketch as my all-time favorite anime soundtracks. For all my complaining, it's not like the show even really did anything wrong. It's exactly what it wanted to be, an absurdly simple school love comedy, and I'm sure plenty of people are very satisfied with that. It certainly could have been worse, and I'd say I do prefer it to a lot of its contemporaries. It may be thoroughly mediocre, but it's not hateable by any means, and there weren't any aspects about the show that I really despised, which is always good. The show can be relaxing with its laid-back structure and quiet atmosphere, and did have a number of moments that were legitimately romantic and heartwarming. When the planets align, the soundtrack kicks in at just the right moment. Even when I know in my head that a scene really doesn't have much going for it in a conventional sense, sometimes that excellent presentation can be enough to land a scene a new layer of meaning and emotional weight. Acchi Kocchi is the kind of show that I typically classify as popcorn entertainment. Sweet, simple, and easy to consume, but ultimately insubstantial and kind of lacking in nutritional value. You know that it's basic and not really all that good for you, but you indulge in it because sometimes you don't want to be challenged, or maybe you really do just have a giant sweet tooth. But even then, it's not like this is even the best popcorn around. Okay, this analogy is getting stupid. Could I recommend Acchi Kocchi? Maybe. If you absolutely adore this kind of romantic comedy and feel as though you've seen all the other much better ones, then go right ahead. Just remember to brush your teeth afterwards. As for me, even though we've grown apart over the years, I'll always have this strange, implacable affection towards this little show. If for nothing else, being an important part of my anime lineage.